Hi guys, here I want to present this tool that I made for building the eyelids. It's pretty simple to use. You just need two curves, one for the upper eyelid, and another one for the lower eyelid.
Also need a joint for reference the center of the eye, in cases where the eye is an spheric one. Well, the center in this case is not usable, but for planar eye or squashed ones, the center should be above the center of the geometry. Well, I have this base almost done. It just need the eyelids set up. So let's build it. I will take the edges of the eyelid for getting the curve. I have the upper one and the lower one. Here we have the lower eyelid curve. Okay, once we have this both curve, we only need to check that both curves start from the same side, in this case the left one. Right, and we name them. For the moment this plugin will work with this name convention, and the one that starts with L as a prefix for the left, and N with curve with is the name of the object. We name them and we are ready to go. Okay, we call the center the upper eyelid and the lower eyelid, and we are ready to build. It's gonna take a while. What I implemented here was a practical way of making the eye, because most problems I find making it was because I couldn't get a proper closing or blinking while doing it. So for that reason I used to ended up using blend shapes or in between fixes for getting a nice result. I'm gonna show you a little problem that happens sometimes, and how I can solve this one with and this tool. Okay, I forgot to mention about these two options that we have for the position of the joints, and there is the one that in the center that is a useful one when the joints come from the center of an spheric object, and the flat one that I was studying this system, trying to get an update to improve the user result. So as you see, the joints come from not from the center but from a line that I call flat line, but it works almost the same. I did just a little the control because I forgot to change the scale on the tool, but it can be done manually, so there is no problem about that. Okay, we ended up having three groups. One for the local system, one for the controls, and one for the joints. Joints and control have to be parented to its respect father joint or control. In this case, for example, I will parent the joints group to the upper head joint, and the same for the control group that has to be parented, for example, to the upper head control, right? And I forgot to mention the local group. This one is a local controls that has to be moved or configured at first, but will not be shown to the animator. This is just for setup. Okay, we parent these guys to the upper head control. And okay, I forgot to mention that I already have a skin this geometry, so I will bring this skin. I'll import the skin that I have previously done, but it's not a big deal. It's just because I already made this script and not need to skin again. But skinning is just painting every joint with every loop as a default, and skin if you are using ng skin tool, use the skin a layer for the eyelid part. Okay, the skin is here, and I will start explaining how the controls for setups works. Well, most of the problems I meet or I find when I made this kind of rigs are that the blinking is not always closing very well. So trying to fix that, I ended up using blend shapes, in between blend shapes, or some fixing that implied set driving keys or anything similar to that. So in order to avoid that kind of process, I ended up implementing controls for setup, which will make a previous setup of how the blink has to be done, and will be applied just in the blinking as an set driving key. It works as a set driving key, so it's a better way to make these fixes. Okay, blinking attributes are in the group of the controls. There are blinking options for the upper eyelid and the lower eyelid, and there are also attributes for controlling the side where the blinking goes. So in this case, the eye is crossing the skin because the configuration is in classic linear, and we have to change it to dual quaternion since the eye is an spheric one. And we can see that blinking is work almost perfect. Okay, but this is a problem that I was talking about first, that at first it looks like it does not have any problem, but when we smooth the geometry, we start noticing that there is a little aperture in the blinking that need to be fixed. So for fixing that, I implemented some controls in the local group that has to be moved. For example, in this case I'm gonna move the controls on the upper blinking. These guys are in the control of system local. I prefer them to select manually by using the outliner, because actually those guys are or has the same shape, so it can be very confusing a little. Okay, I select them, for example 3 guys that will manage the blinking position, and will move a little just to fix this little problem. And this solution will create think to this to be as a set driving key, that is it is creating a set driving key just for the blinking when the blinking is active, so that way it can be explained very easily. There are also controls for the lower eyelid, so we can adjust the closing position according what we want. Okay, in this case the eye is closing very well, but sometimes we have to admit that there are some problems, especially if the the lower eyelid is crossing the upper eyelid. So to avoid that, we also have controls on the back that will push the joints to the front in order to not getting covered by the other eyelid. Okay, and these controls are in the back. I will show you in a moment. And this is working fine, so there is no problem here, but I'm gonna try to explain that in the case that lower eyelid is crossing the upper eyelid. This is the controls that are in the back that will push the joints a little. In this case I will try to push it just for example, right? It can be pushed to the front and it will only work for the blinking attribute. So when this is not blinking, the joint will return to its original position, so there is no problem about changing the original pose of the geometry. Okay, here we have this setup also works with planar eyes, especially those ones that are with a lattice and does not have an spheric shape, but in that case we have to use not the joints that are in the center, that come from the center, but the joints that are in the end of these guys. Maybe I will make another video with another model trying to explain how to use them, but for this one I think it's pretty simple how to use these guys, these controls. Okay, I have to remind that this is working just for the blinking position. For example, I will exaggerate this position and I'm gonna go to change the blink attribute. Of course, the blink attribute, you know, that have to be connected to a control that controls the blink. So I'm not doing this in this moment, but that's to be has to be noted. For example, I will push in more than necessary to show how. This is also why I choose a flat distribution of the joints for for the eyelid. For example, when I push the control to the front, all the joints go to the front. So while blinking, it goes from the rest position to the position that is pushed. Okay, and that's everything. I know that I have to make a lot of fixes and maybe a lot of improvement to this script, but actually it has been working pretty fine in the last characters I use it. So I will leave this script into to be downloaded as free, so you can tell me what changes can be applied to it, what improvement it can have, or what feedback can I get from your characters or your experiences. I will be grateful to get that, and of course I will try to implement the changes. Of course not right now, but I will try to make a version 2 and will consider it every change or every feedback I get. Oh, I forgot about rotation. There is a influence option for rotation are that is in the joint group. We just have to parent the joint of the eye to the joint that has the rod base suffix. We can make we can make a parent constraint. There is no problem about that, because this joint will have just a reference rotation, and the influence can be adjusted as with an attribute that is with a group of control. So for example, I made a parent constraint and I select the attribute and change its position. Right now, with the influence in one, we get a full movement of the eye. But if we change the influence, for example, to be like 0.1, the influence of the eye will work pretty fine. For example, 0.1. That's everything. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.